What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So as we're approaching Gotham Knights, I decided that I would go back and reiterate some of my positions on some of the different aspects of the game. Now, this is a very interesting game. Everyone in the community already knows that this game is one of those games that has really caused, or at least I would say stirred up a lot of conversation over the 2 years that we've been seeing and hearing news about the game. And even earlier than that, when we first got the teases about the game, there were expectations, there was reality checks, and till date, I think we already have a good slice of the pie as to what Gotham Knights is going to be. Now, knowing exactly what it is going to be, that's going to be the biggest challenge because none of us have played the game. But I think that there are some things that I can make educated, I would say, analyses on and how I perceive a lot of them. Now, also, as we're discussing these matters, most of you watch my videos, some of you are new to the channel, and so you probably are wondering what my take is on the game. And one thing is very interesting is, most of my OG community know my take on Gotham Knights, but I fear that a lot of new people don't. So I see some comments from time to time where people will say things like, oh, you're just doing this one thing, you're just hyping the game, you're doing all of this. And because they don't really know where I stand, I feel like it's good to clarify things. And then there's just probably other people who don't necessarily think that. But when I share some of my thoughts with you, it might surprise you. So stay tuned as to some of that. Today, nonetheless, we're going to be focusing on combat. Now, I decided that we will start out this conversation with combat because when I look at the reasons why I want to play Gotham Knights, combat actually went all the way down to maybe somewhere at the bottom of the reasons. If you say maybe what are your top 4 reasons, I would say combat fell down to number 4, because the other things that usually I would not have really prioritized in a game like this, I would, basically have had them in 2nd, 3rd, and maybe 4th place. They all moved all the way up top because Gotham Knights is coming with a different combat system that I wasn't necessarily, expecting. And so I've had to pretty much restructure how I visualize the game in order for me to be able to say, okay, I would take all of these different factors as my reason to want to play the game. And then because I'm very limited on my knowledge on combat, I want to wait till the game comes out so that I can actually experience it for myself. And then hopefully I'm pleasantly surprised and it makes its way up the list, because I want to be as objective as I can for my own sanity. Because at the end of the day, I'm playing Gotham Knights and I'm hoping that I enjoy the game, right? Because even if I enjoy the game, or don't enjoy the game, it still affects me personally. Even though I'll be sharing my thoughts with most of you and you'll be hearing from my perspective, at the end of the day, I'm in the center and the forefront of this. So what are my thoughts on Gotham Knights combat? Well, the truth is, I am stuck in my ways. It's hard for us to change our ways on the fly. It takes a while. It's something that takes a process to enact change. And so when I first saw Gotham Knights combat mechanics and combat systems and started to learn exactly what it was that they were, I was honestly quite shocked. In fact, I thought to myself, man, I would have thought that this game would have brought some other combat system that had been in the Batman universes, like the Arkham systems. And this was a very interesting, discovery for me. And I'm just walking you guys through this process. I hope nobody reads me wrong, because, this Arkham connection and conversation always comes up. But I'm just walking through just to show you guys how my perception pretty much is. And so usually when I play a video game, I'm really spoiled in the sense that Arkham has kind of transformed my mind to prioritize combat over many things, where if the combat is good most times, I can, in a sense, ignore other good elements of the game and not necessarily pay attention to it. So this is a shade or the glasses at which I've looked at many video games that I'm trying to, at least at this point, modify so that I can see other very strong, solid parts of other games as well. And so when you look at the combat system in the Gotham Knights game and what it is that they're presenting, it is very different in its own right. It doesn't necessarily have some of the things that I really did like in the Arkham games, which were the different counter systems within the counter system. Because I know some people want a counter system and they've said this, but I'm just saying that difference was actually quite interesting and actually quite nice. And when I make my comparison, I also want to make my comparison with the Arkham City game. Arkham Knight is kind of different. So in comparing it with Gotham Knights, it doesn't necessarily work because animation speeds are kind of, quite different. But Arkham City really did find the sweet spot. And so in looking at the way that combat really did hit, I was in that position where I was just kind of stuck in my ways. And I still find out that even till this date, there is still that huge aspect of my own ways that I'm still stuck within Arkham City's combat system, that giving Gotham Knights a 100% open-mindedness is not there yet. I'm somewhere around the 75-80% mark nonetheless, which is huge because for some of you, I came from like the 20-30% over the course of the last maybe 12 months to 16 months. So this transformation is actually quite interesting, but it doesn't mean that I would ever rank, without knowing anyways, the combat of Gotham Knights over the combat of Arkham. Deep down in my mind, I still think Arkham City has the very best superhero combat of any superhero video game you want to call out there. Bring Spider-Man. It doesn't even come close. The amount of solutions within this combat system is absolutely insane. The variety of animations that are played by each individual character. And keep in mind, there were only 4 of them. There was Batman, Catwoman, Robin, and Nightwing. And this particular game of 2013 was out of this world. By then, the Spider-Man game was probably somewhere getting its origins in development, or probably just getting its conceptualization phase, and Rocksteady had already dropped a game like this. Let me give you a few examples. When Catwoman is fighting in Arkham City, she actually has different fighting behaviors for different characters, which is normal. You look at the way they built the different enemy types in the Arkham games, you'll notice that you do need for you to perform specific moves to be able to take them down, like the brutes, the really heavy Titan brutes. You have to stun them before you beat them up. And then you also have ways and animations and takedowns that you actually use against the ninjas. And so I realized that Catwoman did have a lot of animations in terms of her counter that I never really paid attention to. So the counter system has a library of animations, and the way this was programmed is whenever you're actually doing a counter animation, it will play one of a series of different animation attacks, and then the enemy NPC will respond based on the animation attack that you actually play. But I also realized that the different characters also would play an animation type based on the kind of enemy NPC. And Catwoman does that a lot with the female ninjas from the League of Assassins in Arkham City. It's a very small interaction, but it shows the depth of detail that they actually put into the Arkham combat system. And so, like I said in the beginning of this video, until I play Gotham Knights and see what level of depth is in the combat, then it will start to change my mind. Now, keep in mind, nonetheless, that there are other things that I feel seem to be strong points for Gotham Knights that will make me want to actually play it, like the open world. For most of us who are there, we want to see Gotham's iteration in this game. So yes, I may be stuck in my ways in category X or Y, or category combat or story or whatever it is, but it doesn't mean that the entire project is a write-off for me. And I think that's exactly where it is that most of us are. Because granted, it's hard for you to be able to play, a specific kind of game that set the tone and expectation for what superhero games to be on many fronts to just quickly switch up like that. And another thing too, keep this in mind, was I think what really happened was when you think about the time difference between the last Batman, Arkham, or whatever game that came out in this line of video games, that time difference till date allowed for us to actually go back and replay those games, or at least appreciate those games over many years, that it got most of us stuck in this way that we're in. And so some of us are, in a sense, getting more open-minded, but it took a very long time. I remember even somewhere around 2000, and I can't remember, just a few years ago, I joined the Batman Arkham Reddit page. And on that Reddit page, man, there were just so many people who appreciated and loved the Arkham games. And it was from that Reddit page I actually got motivated to go ahead and beat Arkham Knights to its completion, 240%. I'm still yet to do City, but hopefully I'll be able to get that done. And you could see that the fans had a deeper appreciation from the game, for the game anyways, than usual. So I'm not going to be surprised if I go to the Batman Arkham page and I see a lot of people that are not necessarily down with Gotham Knights, because again, they spent all that time playing the game. But keep this in mind very carefully, and this is something that I'm always careful to say, is until you adopt a very new game, there is no way you can tell how that game is really going to affect you. There are many games that I had to play multiple times for me to be able to resonate with them. There are games where I bought the game, I played it for 30 minutes, I deleted the game, refunded it, and then come to be the game I actually played and put in more hours than even Batman Arkham. One of them was Elden Ring. I played Elden Ring for the first 30 minutes and I was like, this ain't for me. That's literally what I said. Come to go ahead and look at my Steam library right now. You're going to see that Elden Ring is actually one of my top most played games, even beating, or at least almost beating, on PC anyways, almost beating Batman Arkham Knight. Then when you add my PlayStation playtime, I think you're probably going to have a tie in those two games for action adventure anyways, or RPG, whatever. My most played game, I think, in regard to, say, Steam, that's not The Division anyways, is Mortal Kombat 11. That's also another game that I like. I like combat in video games. Other fighting games that I can't play, I watch. And so that's something that I'm really into, but it's my number one outlook. And I almost wrote off Gotham Knights because it did not seem to meet what I perceived was my standard. But I also had to be kind of careful. You really want to be. You don't want to be that person that throws out the baby with the bathwater, because as much as I like combat, I also like story, and I also like good open world when it's done right. Elden Ring really did unveil that side of my own appreciation for video games. Elden Ring, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. These two games really, expanded my appreciation for open world building. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, for some, may have been maybe one of these, just overly done video games, but for me, I enjoy ancient Greek history, so that was a whole different level of immersion for me. So now that Gotham Knights is actually promising an open world, it's definitely something I am paying the price to see. I want to see how that works. And if the combat doesn't hit the level that it hits for me, as long as I can explore that open world, I'm actually quite down with that. And so I'm sharing this perspective with you guys so that you know exactly where I am, so that I don't want anybody to be misconstrued about anything. In fact, I'm probably going to put this video on my main page on YouTube, so when you come in, you know where I stand. I'll take my time to give a little bit more of my analyses and some of what I'm looking forward to with other aspects of the Gotham Knights game. And so that will be the conversation continuation. So stay tuned so that you can get, the full context. And I really appreciate you guys for taking the time to watch the video. And thank you so much. And hopefully we'll talk soon. Peace out.